And it isn't motivational. It's a checkpoint from inside a build that's actually working. If you're new here, welcome. If you've been here before, welcome back in. Either way, I'm glad you're here. I'm going to give the room a minute just to warm up because the people who belong in this space tend to arrive quietly. They listen first, they feel things out, and that's okay here. If you're live, just type here in the comments so that I know that you're with me. I see a few names coming in, and I see familiar ones too. And that matters. I want to be clear about what this live is and what it isn't. I'm not here to perform. I'm not here to pitch. And I'm not here to convince anyone of anything. I'm here to mark where we are. Tomorrow is Podcast Saturday around my house. It's episode 11 of season 3. And that episode begins the wrap of this season for Soul Plus Systems out on Spotify and Apple. Episode 12 will close it. But before we step into that final stretch, I wanted to pause long enough to name what's solid, what's been learned, and why this season matters. This isn't a recap, it's a tightening. Season 3 has been about learning how to stay with something long enough for it to take shape. It's been letting systems settle instead of constantly chasing new direction. And it's been about building stability before speed. If you're watching the replay, you're just as welcome here. The space isn't time sensitive. It's presence sensitive. I want to say this early, especially for the women listening. You don't need to announce yourself here, and you don't need to prove anything. You don't need to be loud to belong. This space is built for women who are grounded, observant, and intentional. Women who are done performing strength and are ready to build with clarity. That energy takes time to warm, and I respect that. Season 3 has been a season of momentum, but not the kind that burns hot and collapses. It's been steady. It's been cumulative. It's been quiet in the real way growth often is. We crossed 80,000 lifetime views. And we're pulling in over 45,000 monthly views consistently. I'm saying that plainly, without excitement and without apology, because those numbers are not about ego. They're about evidence. They tell me that the system is behaving. And they tell me that the people that find my lives and that are finding this space and staying long enough to listen, they tell me that the work is landing with the right audience, not the biggest one. And that matters to me. The season didn't grow because I chased attention. It grew because I stayed with the work. I stayed teachable. I paid attention to what was working. And I stopped fighting what wanted to settle. Season 3 has been about learning how to listen. Listening to data instead of emotion. Listening to patterns instead of impulse. Listening to my own system instead of overriding it. That's the difference between movement and momentum. So, if you're here today, welcome in. There's a good chance that you're in a similar place, that you're building something. Maybe it's a business. Maybe it's a body of work. Maybe it's a new version of yourself. And you're realizing that speed without structure eventually costs more than it gives. This space exists because I needed proof that growth could be steady, could be sovereign, and sustainable. I needed to know that I didn't have to fracture myself to move forward. Season 3 gave me that proof. And I'm still inside of the work. I'm still learning, but I'm no longer guessing. Before we go any further, I want to anchor something for anyone who's just finding this. This space is for people who want to grow intentionally. Not fast growth, not fake growth, real growth that compounds because it's supported by structure. And that's why systems matter here. Systems aren't cold, they're supportive. They hold you when motivation dips. They give you somewhere to stand when things get quiet. They make growth repeatable instead of exhausting. That's my lane. I'm the systems woman. When you're ready to grow or to scale without losing yourself in the process. You don't have to adopt my pace. You don't have to copy my path. You just have to be willing to stay present long enough to learn. As we move into the wrap of season 3, today is about naming what's solid before we finish. It's about grounding the moment so the close doesn't feel rushed or performative. If you're here live and you're building anything at all right now, just drop building in the comments below. Now, we can talk about this season and what it actually produced. Season 3 didn't grow because something suddenly went viral. It grew because I stopped chasing momentum and started building it. That distinction matters, especially for people who have been told that growth is supposed to be loud, fast, and constant. What's up, Haley? Welcome in. Isolda, welcome in, y'all. And what we built this season is quieter than that, but it's stronger. We crossed 80,000 lifetime views. That number is not a flex to me. It's a marker. It tells me that real people are spending real time here. It also tells me that attention is being earned and not borrowed. It tells me the work is resonating with people who are actually listening. We're also pulling in over 45,000 monthly views consistently. Consistency is the part I pay attention to. Anyone can spike once, and very few people can sustain. Sustainability is the signal of a system that's actually working. What season 3 showed me is that when you stop reacting emotionally to numbers and start responding strategically, that growth actually settles into something that you can actually stand on. The panic disappears. The second guessing quits. The work gets cleaner. And short form content brought people in. And long form content gave them somewhere to stay. The podcast created depth, and the system created continuity. None of that happened by accident, and none of it required perfection. Jet, I see you. Welcome in. Thank you. I appreciate that. It required patience. I stayed with formats long enough to understand how they behaved. I paid attention to what repeated instead of chasing what spiked. I let patterns form before making decisions. That's not glamorous, but it works. Season 3 taught me that growth accelerates when you stop trying to force outcomes and start building conditions that allow outcomes to emerge. That shift alone changed how I think about everything that I build. I didn't arrive the season with confidence. I arrived with willingness, and I was willing to be wrong. I was also willing to adjust. I was willing to learn in public without narrating every single emotion. And that posture matters. A lot of people think that growth requires certainty. In my experience, growth requires curiosity and discipline. Certainty comes later, after repetition has already done its work. And this season was built on repetition, posting consistently, observing results, adjusting without spiraling, staying present even when things felt quiet, letting the system do its job instead of interfering with it. every single time my emotions fluctuated. That's what's allowed momentum to compound. And I want to say something important here, especially for women who feel pressure to perform competence before they actually feel it. You don't need to be confident to be effective. You need to be consistent and willing to learn. Season 3 reinforced that truth over and over again. Learning does not belong to a specific age group. Growth does not belong to people who started early. Systems do not belong only to people with technical backgrounds. And learning belongs to people who stay. If you're somebody who is building later in life, pivoting and starting over, or choosing to grow in a way that doesn't look like everyone else's timeline, the season is proof that you're not late. You're right on time for your own work. This season also taught me how much energy gets wasted when people confuse urgency with importance. Not everything needs to happen right now. Not every idea needs immediate execution, and not every dip needs intervention. Systems teach you when to act and when to let things settle. That's a skill. And I didn't develop that skill overnight. I developed it by staying with the work long enough to see consequences. By noticing what happened when I rushed, and by noticing what happened when I waited. Season 3 rewarded patience. It rewarded structure. It rewarded attention. And it punished impulsivity. That feedback loop is invaluable. If you're here live right now and you're building anything at all, I want you to hear this clearly. You don't need more motivation. You don't need more inspiration. You need a system that can hold when your motivation fades. That's what this season has been about. Not creating content for the sake of content, creating infrastructure that allows growth to continue without constant emotional labor. That's why these numbers matter. Not because they're impressive, but because they're stable. Stability is the foundation of scale. Without it, growth collapses under its own weight. Season 3 gave me stability. It showed me that the work I'm doing has legs. It showed me that when I stay in my lane and let systems do their job, progress becomes predictable. And that predictability is what allows the next phase to begin. And that's why today's live matters. Because before we wrap this season, I want to name what's solid, so the close is intentional and not rushed. If you're here live and this feels steady instead of loud, drop a gear emoji in the comments so I can see you. Now, I want to talk about the reset, because without it, none of what I just named would be sustainable. This is the part of the season that doesn't always look impressive from the outside, but it's the part that actually holds everything together. The reset was not about stopping. It was not about quitting. It was not about starting over. It was about regulation. For a long time, I believed that growth meant pushing through discomfort at all costs. I believed that discipline meant overriding my own system. I believe that rest was something that you earned after progress, not something that you used to support it. Season 3 corrected that belief for me. And what I learned is that growth without regulation eventually collapses. You can build momentum. You can gather attention. You can even see results. But if your nervous system can't hold what you're building, it will eventually turn on you. The reset was about learning how to pause without losing momentum. It was about recognizing when my system needed support instead of pressure. It was about choosing sustainability over adrenaline. That shift changed how I show up. I stopped forcing output when my system was depleted. I stopped interpreting exhaustion as failure. And I stopped confusing urgency with importance. Instead, I started to pay attention. I paid attention to how my body responded to different rhythms. I paid attention to how clarity returned when I slowed down. I paid attention to how much more effective my work became when I was regulated instead of reactive. The reset taught me that learning happens best when your system feels safe enough to stay present. When your system is constantly activated, learning becomes shallow and fragmented. You might consume information, but you won't integrate it. And integration requires space. That's where the audio resets come from. They weren't created as a product strategy. They were created as a support tool because I needed something that worked real, that in my real life, while I was building, something that helped me in my system to settle so that my mind could stay clear enough and that my work could remain intentional. The audio resets are not about numbing out. They're not about escaping reality. They are about grounding, regulation, and clarity. They help your system return to a state where learning and decision making are possible again. I built what I needed first. And that matters because tools built from lived experience tend to be more honest and more useful than tools built from theory alone. These tools are for people who are actively growing, people who are building something real and want to do it without burning themselves out or losing themselves in the process. They're not for people looking for a quick fix. They're not for people who want motivation without responsibility. They're for people who understand that growth requires support and not punishment. Season 3 taught me that regulation is not a luxury, it is a strategy. It also taught me that learning is not a straight line. You don't learn once and then you arrive. You learn, you apply, you adjust, and then you repeat. That cycle only works when your system can tolerate uncertainty and stay present through discomfort. That's where age becomes irrelevant. Learning does not belong to the young. Growth does not belong to people who started early. Systems do not belong only to those who have been structured. Learning belongs to people who are willing to stay curious. I am learning in real time, and I'm sharing that process openly because I know how many people think they are behind, simply because they didn't start earlier or follow a conventional path. You are not behind. You are where you are, and growth begins from here. The reset helped me reclaim that truth. It helped me to let go of pressure to perform growth and reconnect with the process of learning myself. That's why I talk about it openly. It's not to dramatize it and not to turn it into an identity, but to normalize it. Pausing to recalibrate is not failure. Supporting your nervous system, that's not weakness. Using tools to help you stay regulated while growing is not indulgence. It's literally preparation. It's intelligence. It's how you build something that lasts. Season 3 made that clear to me in a way that I couldn't ignore. It showed me that when regulation becomes part of the system, progress stops feeling fragile and starts feeling grounded. That groundedness is what allows the work to deepen. That's why the reset is not a side note in this season, it's a central pillar. Without it, the momentum will be brittle. Without it, the momentum is steady. With it, if you're here live right now in your phase where you're learning something new, rebuilding something old, or growing into a version of yourself that requires more structure than before, I want you to hear this clearly. You don't need to push harder. You don't need to support yourself better. That's what the reset taught me. And that lesson is now built into the way I work, the way that I grow, and the way that systems that I keep building are moving forward. Before I close this out, I want to speak directly to the people in the space because growth doesn't happen in isolation. Systems only matter if they serve real humans, and community only works when it respects sovereignty. If you're new here, I want to say this clearly. You don't need to catch up. You didn't miss anything that disqualifies you. You arrived when you're ready to listen and that's enough. If you're a returning viewer, thank you for staying. Thank you for watching this season unfold without demanding it, to rush, or to perform. That kind of presence matters more than engagement metrics ever will. This is not a space built for spectators. It's built for people who are willing to take responsibility for their own growth, quietly, intentionally, without needing an audience for every single step. And I want to speak directly to the women here for a moment because that matters to me. This space is for women who are done performing strength, women who are done proving they can carry more than they should, women who are ready to build from clarity instead of pressure. You don't need to shrink to grow. You don't need to harden yourself to succeed. And you don't need to rush to be taken seriously. You can be disciplined without being rigid. You can be ambitious without being chaotic. You can be sovereign without being isolated. That balance is learnable. That's the energy that I built from. And that's the energy I want this space to continue to attract. Everything I'm building is for the benefit of the people who are ready to grow intentionally. Not because growth looks good, but because growth creates stability, freedom, and choice, creates leverage. That's why systems matter here. Systems are not about control. They're about support, and they remove unnecessary friction, and they reduce emotional labor. They give you something solid to lean on when motivation fluctuates. A good system doesn't demand that you feel inspired every single day. It allows you to show up consistently, even when you don't. That's my lane. I'm the nervous system woman, and the system's woman. When you're ready to grow or scale without losing yourself in the process. Not because I have everything figured out, but because I know how to build frameworks that hold learning and expansion over time. I don't believe in growth that requires self-betrayal. I don't believe in scale that fractures your life. And I don't believe in hustle that ignores the cost. I believe in structure that supports freedom. As we enter the wrap of season 3, I want to mark this moment as one of integration. Episode 11 tomorrow begins the wraps. Episode 12 will close the season. This is the point where things tighten, not where they end. The season wasn't about arrival. It was about laying foundations that actually hold. The views matter because they reflect reach. The consistency matters because it reflects stability. And the reset matters because it reflects wisdom. And the learning matters because it reflects humility. Those values are what this space is built on. If you're here live and there's one word that describes how this season feels for you right now, I invite you to drop it in the comments below. No explanation required, just the word. If you're building something in your life right now and this feels steady instead of loud, that's not an accident. That's alignment. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I want to say this directly. Subscribe and stay close. Not because you owe me anything, not because you need more content, but because this is an ongoing build. And this is where I document what actually works when growth is intentional and systems are respected. I don't promise shortcuts. I don't promise perfection. I promise honesty, structure, and consistency. That's the commitment. I'll keep showing up. I'll keep learning out loud. And I will keep building systems that work in real life for real people at real stages of growth. If you're here live today, thank you for being part of this moment. If you're watching the replay, I'm glad you found your way here too. Season 3 is tightening. The work continues. That's all for now. Until next time, YouTube.